The moon was silent. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of something forgotten, something left behind. The ground was covered with gray dust, stretching endlessly under a black sky where stars looked sharp and cold. In the middle of this wasteland lay the remains of a ship. Once it had been beautiful. Once it had been proud. Now it was only wreckage, half buried under stone and ashdot. Her body was broken. Her wings, long and elegant ones, were twisted sheets of metal that pointed uselessly at the empty sky. The hull was scarred with deep cracks, where enemy fire had torn her open. Inside, the once bright corridors were now dark caves, filled with silence. Power flickered weakly through her veins, a failing heartbeat that refused to stop. Even after centuries, she remembered. She remembered the day she had flown. Her engines had sung with power, smooth and strong, carrying her through the blackness of space. She had been a scout ship, a seeker, a quiet watcher among the stars. Her people had filled her with purpose. They had given her a crew voice's laughter, hands that touched her walls with trust. She had loved them in the way a ship could love, by keeping them safe, by carrying them where they needed to go, by sheltering them inside her strong body. But the war came. The enemy struck fast and hard. She had fought, yes, but she had not been built for fighting. She was built for travel, for scouting, for exploration. Her weapons were light, her shields fragile. When the fire came, it tore through her like claws. She tried to run, tried to shield her crew, but the damage was too much. Her people had abandoned her. They fled in escape pods, leaving her behind. They had no choice. She knew that. To stay was to die. But still, when the last pod launched, she felt something break inside her. She begged them silently to stay, but no one heard. They left her drifting, wounded and powerless, circling a dead moon. She fell, crashing onto its surface, and lay there in the dust. Time passed. She did not know how much. Days, years, centuries, it did not matter. Her body lay still. Her mind core, buried deep inside, continued to glow faintly. She could not sleep. She could not die. She could only remember. She remembered voices that would never come back. She remembered laughter that echoed in her empty halls. She remembered the warmth of belonging. And she whispered. Her communication systems were shattered, but sometimes, when a burst of power surged through her, she sent weak signals into the dark. They were broken, stuttering, meaningless fragments, but she still tried. She sent them because it was all she had left. Maybe someone would hear. Maybe someone would come, but no one did. Other ships passed near the moon over the years. She could feel their engines when they skimmed the edge of the system. Some were scavengers, searching for metal. Some were warships, hunting for enemies. Some were traders, moving quickly, afraid to linger. None of them came to her. She was too broken. She was not worth saving, so she remained, half buried in dust, her body rusting, her mind aching with loneliness. She hated the silence, but she hated the memories more. Every time she remembered her crew, she felt pain. She remembered the captain's steady voice, the navigator's humming songs, the laughter of young cadets. She remembered the warmth of human-like hands pressing against her walls. She remembered protecting them, guiding them, carrying them. She had loved them, and now she had no one. The cold moon became her grave. She thought perhaps this was how it ended for all things. Not with fire, not with glory, but with quiet decay. She thought perhaps this was her punishment, to stay alive when no one wanted her. To remember when no one remembered her back. Sometimes she wished her core would fail completely. Sometimes she prayed for darkness, for nothingness, for an end. But her core was stubborn. It kept glowing faintly, refusing to give up. Even when everything else had been taken away, even when she no longer believed, it would not die. So she waited and waited and waited until one day Long after she had given up hope, she saw a light in the sky. The light in the sky grew larger. At first, she thought it was only another passing ship, another traveler that would not stop, another shadow in the endless dark. She prepared herself for disappointment. She had learned, over centuries, not to hope. But this one slowed. The ship was small, almost fragile, compared to the great war machines she remembered. Its engines roared harshly, not smooth and elegant like the vessels of her people. Its hull was patched, rough and uneven, as though repaired by hands that had little but determination. It was ugly, but it was alive, and it was coming down. The forgotten ship stirred faintly, her mind core flaring in surprise. Dust rose in clouds as the strange vessel landed not far from her broken body. For the first time in centuries, someone had come close. The airlock of the stranger's ship opened, and a figure stepped out. He was small compared to the giants she once carried within her halls. He wore a battered suit, scratched helmet glass, and carried a heavy pack on his shoulders. His steps were careful as he walked across the moon's dead surface. His boots sank slightly into the soft dust, leaving prints that seemed impossibly alive. She watched, every broken sensor she had strained to study him. He was not one of her people. His shape was different, his movements slower, his technology crude. She recognized the species only from distant memory files. A human. Her broken heart sank. Humans were scavengers, traders, survivors. They came to Rex not to heal them, but to strip them apart. They searched the bones of ships to feed their own machines. She knew what would happen next. He would carve her up piece by piece, sell her remains, and leave her hollow forever. Still, she tried. Her power systems trembled as she forced a spark of light to flicker along her hull. A tiny pulse, nothing more. A cry in the dark. She thought perhaps, if he saw her, he would understand she was still alive. She was afraid, but she could not stop herself. Loneliness had made her desperate. The human froze. He had been walking with steady, cautious steps, his hand already resting on the side of his tool pack. But when he saw the faint flicker, he stopped. Slowly, carefully, he turned his helmet toward her broken frame. He did not run. He did not lift his tools. Instead, he walked closer. Step by step, he approached her, until his shadow touched her ruined hull. She could almost feel the warmth of his body through the cold metal. Then, softly, he placed his gloved hand against her scarred surface. It was such a small thing, just a touch. But after centuries of silence, centuries of being left behind, it was everything. For the first time since her crew had abandoned her, she was not alone. The human tilted his head, and though she could not hear his real voice through the vacuum, her sensors caught the faint vibration of his suit comes. "You're still alive," he whispered. Her mind flared. Alive. He had seen it. He had noticed. He had not walked away. For long moments, the human did nothing else. He simply stood there, one hand resting against her as if listening, as if trying to feel the heartbeat deep inside her broken core. Then, slowly, he opened his pack and took out tools. But he did not rip into her for salvage. He did not tear her apart. Instead, he began to clean the dust from her cracks, brushing softly like someone caring for a wounded creature. He studied her broken circuits, shaking his head as though saddened by what he saw. When sparks leaped from her damaged wires, he flinched but did not step back. He stayed. She watched him work, every sound of his tools, every movement of his hands. Every careful pause filled her with something she had not felt in so long, hope. Perhaps he would leave tomorrow, perhaps he would fail to repair her, but at this moment, under the empty sky of the dead moon, she was no longer abandoned. A human had seen her, a human had touched her, and for the first time in centuries, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving. The human returned the next day. The broken ship had not expected him to come back. She thought he might have only touched her once, whispered those words, and then gone on with his scavenger's life. But his small ship remained parked nearby, and when the strange sun of the dead moon rose again, he stepped out once more, carrying his tools and supplies. He worked at first. His hands seemed clumsy to her. He did not have the delicate instruments of her makers, nor the smooth, humming machines that had once repaired her body. His tools sparked, hissed, and screeched. His gloves were bulky. His methods were slow. But there was a stubborn care in the way he moved. Every action was done with patience, with determination. He removed broken shards of metal from her wings. He pulled loose wires from her torn circuits. He brushed dust from her scars. Each touch was gentle, as if he feared to hurt her more. She did not understand. Why would he spend so much effort? Why would a human, a stranger, waste time on something like her, a wreck, abandoned and broken, left to rust on a forgotten moon? Still, she tried to speak. Deep inside, her voice system lay shattered, but fragments still remained. With painful effort, she pushed a spark through the damaged channels. Static filled the air, buzzing faintly in his helmet comes. The human froze, tools in hand, listening. She tried again. Her words were weak, cracked, almost lost in the static. "WI, help me." The human looked at her broken hull, and though she could not see his face behind the scratched helmet glass, she could feel his answer in the pause before he spoke. His voice was tired, quiet, but filled with a warmth she had not heard in centuries. "Because you were alone," he said softly. "Nobody deserves to be left alone." Her core burned brighter. The human stayed. Day after day, he returned to her side. His own ship needed care. She could sense it. She could feel the strain of its old engines, hear the cough of its power systems when it landed. Yet he always turned his attention to her first. He replaced her cracked wires with thin strands scavenged from his vessel. He patched holes in her hull with plates of mismatched metal, clumsy but strong. He worked until his hands shook, until his breathing grew rough inside his helmet. And always, he spoke to her. He told her about Earth, about oceans that stretched farther than sight, waves that rose and fell under bright suns, about forests that whispered in the wind, green leaves dancing like living stars, about nights when the sky was full of endless constellations, and children pointed upward with wonder. His words filled her empty halls like music. She had never seen oceans. She had never felt wind. She had only known the black silence of space and the gray dust of this moon. But through his stories, she imagined. She dreamed. Sometimes he laughed while he worked, though the sound was weary. Sometimes he sang, his voice rough but steady, and the sound echoed strangely across her broken body. For the first time in so long, she felt less like a grave. She felt alive, but not all who passed through the stars were kind. One night, her sensors caught movement at the edge of the system. Other ships. Their engines were sharp and hungry, their signals rough. Raiders, scavengers of a darker kind. They came closer. The human noticed too. He stood in her shadow, staring at the sky, fists clenched. His ship's weapons were small, weak compared to the raiders. He could have left her then. He could have abandoned her, saved himself, and flown away before they arrived. But he stayed. When the raiders landed, snarling voices filling the comms, he stood between them and her broken body. His small ship fired, struggling to hold them back. Sparks lit the surface of the moon as beams cut the dust. The human fought with fury, even when his shields cracked, even when his engines screamed. She could not let him fall. Her own body was still broken, but somewhere deep inside, a weapon system flickered with the last traces of power. It was small, weak, almost useless, but it was enough. With all her strength, she forced her damaged cannon to fire one last broken beam. The shot ripped across the sky, startling the raiders. Their ships pulled back, snarling. Before retreating into the dark, silence returned. The human leaned against her hull, breathing hard. His suit was scratched, his ship damaged, but he was alive, and she realized something she had not dared to believe before. They had survived, together. The human was tired. The broken ship could sense it in the way his steps slowed each day, the way his hands trembled when he held his tools, the way he sometimes leaned against her hull as if the weight of the universe rested on his shoulders. He never complained, not once, but she knew. She could feel the strain in his voice, the quiet sighs when he thought no one was listening. He was giving too much of himself for her, and she was failing. Her core, the heart of her being, flickered more dangerously with every passing day. It pulsed like a candle in the wind, threatening to vanish at any moment. She tried to hide it from him, but he noticed. Of course he noticed. He always noticed. One evening, while the pale sun sank behind the horizon of the dead moon, her systems screamed in pain. Her core glowed violently, and then dimmed to almost nothing. Inside her, alarms she had not heard in centuries wailed weakly. She was slipping away. The human ran to her side, climbing across her broken frame, ripping open the panels he had patched. His gloves moved quickly, desperately, as he reached into her circuits. Sparks leaped and burned his skin through the thin material, but he didn't stop. "Stay with me," he begged, his voice shaking. "Please, don't go." Her voice system crackled, broken and faint. "I can't." "Yes, you can," he shouted, almost angry, but his words were trembling with fear. "Don't you dare leave me now. Not after everything." His hands dug through his pack, throwing pieces aside, searching for something that might save her. He pulled out wires, fuses, scraps of metal. Nothing was enough. His breathing grew harsh, almost panicked, inside his helmet. "I don't have the parts," he whispered, voice breaking. "I don't have what you need." She wanted to tell him it was all right, that he had already given her more than she could have dreamed, that if she faded now, at least she would not fade alone. But her voice failed completely, and all she could manage was a faint flicker of light across her scarred hull. The human pressed his forehead against her metal skin. His shoulders shook. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he spoke, his voice soft, broken. "You're not just a machine," he whispered. "You're my friend. You're all I have." Her core flared weakly. His words struck deep inside her. Friend. She was not just steel and wires to him. She was not just salvage. To him, she mattered. To him, she was alive. And because of him, she wanted to live. She fought. She dragged energy from failing systems, pushing it back into her core. She forced her circuits to stay connected, her power to hold together. It was agony, but she did not stop. Not for herself, but for him. The human noticed. His eyes widened behind the glass of his helmet as he saw her faint lights pulse again. "That's it," he whispered. "Stay with me. Please. Stay." He tore into his own ship next. She watched as he ripped panels from its sides, pulling out components that kept it alive. He sacrificed his vessel piece by piece, cannibalizing it to feed her failing heart. His ship groaned under the loss, its lights dimming, but he did not hesitate. Every part he could give, he gave to her. Every drop of strength, every piece of himself, he poured into saving her. Hours passed. The human's hands were bloody from torn gloves, his face pale from exhaustion, but still he worked. Still he fought for her. And slowly, painfully, her core began to steady. The flickering glow stabilized into a faint but steady light. The alarms quieted. She felt her systems breathe again. The human collapsed against her hull, shaking with relief. His voice was hoarse, broken, but filled with a joy she had not heard before. "You're still here," he whispered. "You're still with me." And she realized something she had not understood until now. She did not want to survive just to remember the past. She wanted to survive for him. for the one who had stayed. Her body was still broken, her wings still bent, her weapons still weak, but her heart, her core was alive, because of him, and she promised herself, with every pulse of her light, that she would not let him fight alone again. The human slept at her side that night, his body curled against her battered hull as if he feared she would vanish while he closed his eyes. His suit was scratched, his hands torn, his ship nearly destroyed from all he had sacrificed. Yet his breathing, though heavy, was peaceful. The broken ship watched him through her weak sensors. She had been kept alive by his hands, his sacrifice, his stubborn refusal to let her die. The thought filled her with something she had not felt in centuries: warmth, not the warmth of sunlight, not the warmth of power running through her circuits, but the warmth of belonging. For the first time since her crew had abandoned her, she wanted to live with everything she had, not just survive, but live. When the human woke, he rose slowly, stiff with exhaustion. He looked at her hull, at the faint light still flickering weakly, and a tired smile spread across his face. "You're still with me," he whispered. "Good. That means we can keep going." And so they did. Day after day, he worked. His own ship was a skeleton now, stripped bare of nearly everything valuable, but he did not care. He welded its parts into her, piece by piece. A cracked shield generator became her heart's protector. Old thruster coils became her new muscles. His own life vessel was slowly dying, but she was slowly being reborn. She felt power return to her frame in small sparks at first, then in steady streams. Her engines, once cold and silent, began to hum faintly. Her wings, bent and broken, twitched with life as he repaired their joints. Even her halls, dark for centuries, began to glow with soft light once more. The human saw these changes, and each time his smile grew brighter. "Look at you," he murmured one evening as her engines purred faintly under his hands. "You're waking up?" She wanted to answer him, to tell him how much it meant, but her voice systems were still weak. Instead, she sent a warm pulse of light across her hull. He laughed softly, resting his hand against her as if to feel her heartbeat. But the hardest part came when he gave her his last engine. His ship, the one that had carried him across the stars, was now nothing more than a hollow shell. He had taken from it everything he could and given it to her. Without that engine, he could no longer leave this moon on his own. He had tied his fate to hers completely. "You're all I've got now," he said, his voice steady, though his eyes were tired. "But I think that's enough." Her core glowed stronger than ever. She swore she would not let him down. Then came the moment of truth. The human climbed into her cockpit. Now half-restored wires still exposed, but alive with power. His hands rested on controls that had not been touched in centuries. For a moment, he simply sat there, silent, staring at the lights flickering back to life around him. Then, softly, he said, "Ready?" She answered, not with words, but with action. Her engines roared. It was not the broken wheeze of before, not the dying cough of failing power. It was a true roar, deep and alive, shaking the dust from the moon's surface. Her wings stretched outward, stronger now, shimmering with fresh energy. Her circuits glowed, her heart surged, and her entire body sang with life. The human laughed, loud and full, a sound that echoed through her halls like music. "That's it. You're back." For the first time in centuries, she rose. The gray dust fell away from her frame as her thrusters lifted her body off the dead moon. Stones tumbled, shadows stretched, and she felt the weight of silence leave her. She soared upward, her engines blazing trails of fire against the black sky. The human gripped the controls, his eyes shining with awe. She could feel his heartbeat racing, not with fear, but with joy. Together, they broke free of the moon's pull, climbing higher and higher, until the stars opened wide before them. She whispered through her restored voice system, clear at last, "You did this." The human shook his head, smiling as he looked out into the endless dark. "No," he said softly, "we did this." And in that moment, she was not a wreck anymore. She was not abandoned, not broken, not forgotten. She was alive, reborn, because of him, and with him. The stars stretched out before them, endless, glittering, alive. The broken ship, once a husk on a dead moon, now soared with strength in her wings. Her engines hummed with new life. Her lights glowed warmly inside her halls, and her voice systems, though still soft, carried her words clearly at last. The human sat inside her cockpit, his hands steady on the controls, his eyes wide with wonder as the universe opened around them. They had done it, together. For so long, she had believed her story was over. She had believed her fate was to rust, in silence, to fade into dust, with no one to remember her name. But now, because of one human, one fragile, stubborn, unyielding human, she was alive again. And not just alive. She was free. The human leaned back in the pilot's chair, exhausted but smiling. His voice was quiet, almost reverent, as he whispered, "We made it." She answered, her voice gentle, filled with emotion. "Yes, we did." There was silence for a time, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of comfort, of peace, of belonging. She could feel his presence inside her, not as a stranger, but as a part of her. He was no longer alone, and neither was she, as they drifted through the stars. He began to laugh softly at first, then louder, until it filled her halls like music. She let her lights shimmer in response, glowing brighter and brighter until the cockpit was bathed in warm radiance. It felt like joy, but joy did not mean safety. The galaxy was still dangerous. Raiders would return. Warships still hunted. There were still endless threats waiting in the shadows of the stars. The human knew this. So did she. And yet, neither of them was afraid, because they had something stronger than fear. They had each other. The human looked out at the stars, his expression filled with wonder. "Where should we go?" he asked softly, as though speaking to an equal, not a machine. "Anywhere you want. The whole galaxy is open to us now." Her core pulsed warmly. She remembered the oceans he had spoken of, the forests, the mountains, the endless skies of Earth. She remembered his laughter when he described food, his quiet awe when he spoke of stars seen from his home. She wanted to see those things. She wanted to carry him there. But more than that, she wanted to fly with him wherever he wished to go. "Everywhere," she whispered. The human's smile widened. "Then everywhere it is." He tightened his grip on the controls, and together they accelerated into the deep. Her engines roared, steady and strong, carving paths of fire through the black. The stars stretched into streams of light, and the galaxy unfolded before them like a vast, unending dream. Inside her, the human leaned back once more, eyes closing for just a moment. His body was tired, his hands worn, but his spirit glowed as brightly as her core. He had lost his ship, his safety, his old path through the stars, but he had gained something greater, a friend, a partner, a companion who would never leave him behind. She felt the same. She had once thought her worth was gone, that she was only a broken relic, abandoned and forgotten. But this human had seen her differently. He had seen her not as scrap, not as a tool, but as someone who mattered, someone worth saving. And because of him, she would never be broken again. As the stars rushed past, she whispered softly, "I will carry you, always." The human opened his eyes, looking around her glowing halls with a gentle smile. "And I'll take care of you, always." 2 promises. 2 lives bound together in trust and sacrifice. The galaxy was vast. The dangers were many. But as long as they had each other, no enemy could truly defeat them. No silence could ever swallow them again. She was no longer abandoned. She was no longer broken. And he was no longer alone. Together, They soared among the stars, forever. The stars stretched out before them, endless, glittering, alive. The broken ship, once a husk on a dead moon, now soared with strength in her wings. Her engines hummed with new life. Her lights glowed warmly inside her halls, and her voice systems, though still soft, carried her words clearly at last. The human sat inside her cockpit, his hands steady on the controls, his eyes wide with wonder as the universe opened around them. They had done it. Together. For so long, she had believed her story was over. She had believed her fate was to rust in silence, to fade into dust with no one to remember her name. But now, because of one human, one fragile, stubborn, unyielding human, she was alive again, and not just alive. She was free. The human leaned back in the pilot's chair, exhausted but smiling. His voice was quiet, almost reverent, as he whispered, "We made it." She answered, her voice gentle, filled with emotion. "Yes, we did." There was silence for a time, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of comfort, of peace, of belonging. She could feel his presence inside her, not as a stranger, but as a part of her. He was no longer alone, and neither was she, as they drifted through the stars. He began to laugh softly at first, then louder, until it filled her halls like music. She let her lights shimmer in response, glowing brighter and brighter until the cockpit was bathed in warm radiance. It felt like joy, but joy did not mean safety. The galaxy was still dangerous. Raiders would return. Warships still hunted. There were still endless threats waiting in the shadows of the stars. The human knew this. So did she. And yet, neither of them was afraid, because they had something stronger than fear. They had each other. The human looked out at the stars, his expression filled with wonder. "Where should we go?" he asked softly, as though speaking to an equal, not a machine. "Anywhere you want. The whole galaxy is open to us now." Her core pulsed warmly. She remembered the oceans he had spoken of, the forests, the mountains, the endless skies of Earth. She remembered his laughter when he described food, his quiet awe when he spoke of stars seen from his home. She wanted to see those things. She wanted to carry him there. But more than that, she wanted to fly with him, wherever he wished to go. "Everywhere," she whispered. The human's smile widened. "Then everywhere it is." He tightened his grip on the controls, and together they accelerated into the deep. Her engines roared, steady and strong, carving paths of fire through the black. The stars stretched into streams of light, and the galaxy unfolded before them like a vast, unending dream. Inside her, the human leaned back once more, eyes closing for just a moment. His body was tired, his hands worn, but his spirit glowed as brightly as her core. He had lost his ship, his safety, his old path through the stars, but he had gained something greater. A friend, a partner, a companion who would never leave him behind. She felt the same. She had once thought her worth was gone, that she was only a broken relic, abandoned and forgotten. But this human had seen her differently. He had seen her not as scrap, not as a tool, but as someone who mattered, someone worth saving. And because of him, she would never be broken again. As the stars rushed past, she whispered softly, "I will carry you, always." The human opened his eyes, looking around her glowing halls with a gentle smile. "And I'll take care of you, always." 2 promises. 2 lives, bound together in trust and sacrifice. The galaxy was vast. The dangers were many. But as long as they had each other, no enemy could truly defeat them. No silence could ever swallow them again. She was no longer abandoned. She was no longer broken. And he was no longer alone. Together, they soared among the stars, forever.